forever.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Most Holy Rosary. My name is Ed Visner, and tonight we have with us a special guest, Father Mitch Pacwa from EWTN. How you doing tonight, Father?
I'm just as fine as frog hair.
All right, good to have you here.
Have you ever seen frog hair?
I didn't know that frogs had hair, no.
Well, that's because you didn't look close. That's how fine it is.
Oh, it's really fine. That's a good one, Father. Are you staying cool down there? Because it's 101 here in
No.
California.
No, it's hot.
Yeah, it probably melts those frog hairs right off.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Well, good to have you here today, Father. It's always a last-minute thing. Justin said he couldn't make it, so I thought, well, I'll just give Father Mitch a call and see if, and he's like, I'll do it.
That was my experience of Dayton 52 years ago. I'm, not the first one that the girl might get hold of, but eventually.
Makes it happen. Well, thank you so much for your time, Father. And we gather here every night, and we've been faithful families, been growing, praying together. We started at the beginning of COVID-19, and we just thought we got to do something. The world is falling apart, and things are changing faster than we ever thought possible. Overnight, our churches were closed, and we couldn't go to Mass, and followed by, riots in the streets. And so, what is your, words of advice for us, Father, in regards to prayer and what's happening in the world? How can we integrate prayer into changing our life and the world through the Rosary?
I think there are a number of things that we have to keep in mind. I know a couple responses are not particularly helpful. For instance, some people just want to hide it. The news is so bad, they just don't want to hear it anymore. And for those of the listeners who live in America or in the other democracies, that is extremely dangerous, because democracies, in our case, a democratic republic, they can work only because the citizens are well informed. If the citizens are not well informed, they will be swayed by foolish people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why that's not a good response. We need to keep up to things. A second response, and I get this a lot in the emails that I get on my television show, is that there are a lot of people who think, well, this is the end times. And the first part of the response to that is, you don't know that, and I don't know that, and the angels don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
So don't make that up, because that also leads to people doing a lot of foolish things. For instance, just in the last 5 years, there have been two different people that predicted the end times. People sold their houses
Mm-hmm.
before the date. I, on the other hand, invited one of the guys over to come for some coffee. I'll make some cake. We'll sit down and talk. But I set the date for the day after his prediction.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's kind of bratty, but it's the kind of thing that we see foolishness come from people who think they know, but Jesus, our Lord, said the angels don't know. And it also becomes an escape from the responsibilities that we do have now. It is not on the final exam to know the dates of the end time. Our obedience to the 10 Commandments and the Sermon on the Mount are on the final exam.
Mm-hmm.
When we die and go before our Lord, He'll want to know if we were busy doing the things He called us to do, or if we were speculating about stuff that we didn't need to know. So this is another kind of response that is a distraction. And sometimes I suspect that the evil one is as much involved in pushing that kind of response as is anything else. Well-intentioned people who get tricked by a bad line of thought.
Yes.
On the other hand, we also have to, if we stay informed and stay very much involved, we have to understand, what can I do to protect lives during this pandemic, to help those, if I'm able to, help others, and there are a variety of ways we can each find to help people. I've been so impressed with the clever ways people have found to help those in need, making food available and cooking for the people in the service industries, the doctors, the nurses, and such. So that's one thing. Then we have the other problem in our country of this growing Marxist critique that's based on a redefinition of justice. And there's a call for justice. And everybody says, yeah, I'm for justice. But the problem is that there is a Marxist definition or redefinition of justice. Traditionally, justice means giving everybody what is due to each person. And that has to be done. Police have to do that to the people they arrest. Judges have to do that to people standing before them. And that means equal justice under the law.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to have a clear sense of applying justice principles, of giving everybody their due in business, housing that you have, and so on. But the Marxists redefine justice. So they say a word that we like, but they don't mean what we mean. They mean you give everybody everything equally. And you share equally, whether it is due to somebody or it is not. And what that is, it sounds, again, sort of like a virtuous point, but it puts the distributors, the people in charge of the distribution, in total control of everybody else. And the people proposing it want to be those folks in charge. Mm-hmm. And so this, I think it's relevant for us who are praying this rosary tonight to consider that, because I believe it was at the July 1917 apparition that our Blessed Mother warned the children at Fatima about the dangers that are coming out of Russia. They didn't know what Russia was. Mm-hmm. And they certainly didn't know what communism was. And Our Lady, as you would expect, was 100% right. It wasn't just errors of thought, but it was a vicious error. So that by the time the Soviet Union dissolved itself, let me just go back to Stalin. Just in Stalin's time, when he died in the early 1950s, they had already killed 61.9 million people, of their own people.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Hitler had 10 million executed in all of his concentration camps. Stalin killed 6 times as many. And what we fail to understand is that he did it in the name of this distributive justice rather than real justice. And he could use that principle to get such control over people's lives that he could have a significant portion of his nation executed between from the 1920s through his time. And this is something that we have to pay attention to in our prayer tonight, because Our Lady asked us to pray the Rosary against these kind of dangers. Again, she didn't specify communism, but that's what it ended up being.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe at the time she spoke it, the Mensheviks had just taken control of the government. And it was just 5 days after her last apparition that the Bolsheviks took over. And they did it with only 45,000 Bolsheviks, taking over a country of 150 million. But they did it in ways that resemble our streets today. You could not dare to criticize them. You could not dare to disagree with them. They savagely beat and killed people who stood up against them in any way, and they made everybody afraid.
So let me jump in real quick here with a question, Father. So in short, then, we obviously don't know when the end of the world is, but can we say, can we say, though, because of what you're talking about in the history of what has happened and what the movements that are happening in our culture right now, we could be possibly at the end of our civilization in America as we know it if we're not careful?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Ours is a civilization that was founded when Benedictine and Irish monks evangelized the Germanic tribes that had invaded Europe. And around those monasteries all over Europe, the cities of Europe sprang up. The Roman cities had been abandoned because they had been destroyed so often by the barbarians. The monks started monasteries with their chapel at the center, and they called people together for prayer and conversion. It was these Benedictines who converted the Germans